Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. Here to discuss the 2012 Tim Burton Johnny Depp Dark Shadows movie. This movie stars Johnny Depp as Barnabas Collins, Bella Heathcote as Victoria Winters, Michelle Pfeiffer as Elizabeth Collins' daughter, Evergreen as Angelique, Jackie Earle Haley as Willie Loomis. You know, when you look through this cast of this movie, you go, how didn't this work? I'm going to get into that. So, where did the problems for this movie begin? I'm going to start with the script change. That's where the problem really began for this movie. If you really want to cast the stone in any direction, and look, no, I've never read the original script, and I know people have it, and that's fine. I'm willing. Their state, their feeling was it was too much like Twilight. And no, I'm no fan of Twilight, but no offense, so is the movie you really made in a way, but in a more goofier way. The movie they made, this movie here, to me is more like a. It's weird. There's a parody version of Twilight. I forget what it's called, but this more feels like a parody version of what Twilight, what not only what Dark Shadows was, but what Twilight was. And it's really, really weird. Where else did this go wrong? I'll get more into the cons here in a second. There are things I liked about this movie. I don't want people to think I'm just here to knock it. I did like the sets. The sets are really, really well done. I like the bottom of Widow's Hill, how Johnny Depp as Barnabas is standing there. I like the effects they use. They use this is really well done here, despite the story not being great. I do to me this film has the second best soundtrack in the Dark Shadows motion picture franchise. I use that word very loosely because really, Dark Shadows only has three films, and that's unfortunate. Um, where are the other problems with this movie? I like the past scenes, but I think some of the problems did begin here too. Here's what I liked is Johnny, because I've been pointing out the differences between the characters in the movies and in the series, and I'm going to do that here too, because the one thing people attack with this movie is, oh, it completely, it didn't go off the source material. Okay, part of me agrees with that. It didn't really, but in the same way, it knew these are more the characters' namesakes, is what I'm trying to say. Sort of like the other two movies. Is Johnny Depp's Barnabas Jonathan Fritz? No. And here's why I say this. When you look at Johnny Depp's Barnabas and you think about his interaction with Angelique, prior to being cursed, Angelique says, why don't you tell me you love me? Because that would be a lie. In many ways, this is very strange to me. And this is the one moment where I went, that's really interesting. Because in many ways, this is something we didn't get directly from Jonathan's Barnabas, where he's looking at Angelique and saying, I don't love you. Basically, what Johnny Depp's Barnabas is doing is he's basically telling Angelique, hey, I don't love you. If I told you that, that would be a lie. He's telling her the truth. He's being honest with her. And I found this really interesting because, you know, something Jonathan Fred has always said, a liar is very evil. The most evil thing is a liar. And I agree with that. So here they're taking Johnny Depp's Barnabas and having him tell the truth about to Angelique. Now, is that where the biggest issue is? No, but I find that one interesting. Here's another thing I find interesting. Before we get to that part, Angelique's mother is briefly in this story. There's a little girl and there's a grown woman holding her hand, and that's Angelique's mother. Here's something I'll never understand. If you were going to introduce, and if you were going to have Angelique's mother, I want to say that's just Eva Green uh, standing there doing the voice because that's who it sounds like. I could be wrong. If someone knows who that is or isn't, I think it's just Eva Green. They don't show the face; you just hear a voice. Um, but because Eva Green does that voice in the movie later on, so that's why I say I think it's Eva Green just standing there doing the voice, and there's a little girl. Again, I could be wrong, but with this, you see Angelique's mom holding her hand. And she says, "Angelique, know your place." If you were gonna have, you know, what happened here? Did Angelique's mother just disappear? Because the next time we see Angelique, she's a grown woman. She's still serving the Collins family, and it's like, well, wait a second. Like time went by quick. Like you know what I mean? They don't get into a full fledged story of Barnabas growing up. That happens very fast. And I think some of that is the problem, but here's where the real craziness begins to me. Before Barnabas gets cursed, his parents die. His Angelique kills his parents because he was honest with her. Here's right there. Remember when Jonathan Fritz Barnabas became a vampire? He had to watch his sister die. He had to watch his mother die. Even with the vampire's powers, Jonathan Fritz Barnabas felt helpless and powerless, and it made you feel sorry for him. Where is that in this movie? That's where this here is where the problems begin with it. And from a storytelling standpoint, because Barnabas's parents die so quickly that Barnabas begins to research the occult and the devil. And it's like, it, it, and really, it doesn't do him any favors. It doesn't help him solve his parents' murder. It doesn't bring him closer to solving his parents' murder. When he finally discovers Angelique is a witch is until after she curses him. And to me, right then and there is when he should deduct that Angelique murdered his parents. I mean, come on, you really think your parents' murder was an accident when a woman just set a curse on you? And it's not done the way it is in the series. There's no bat through the window. In many ways, here's why I'll give this movie some credit. They actually use literal witchcraft. They take a feather, they use water. So they're more doing it the traditional witchcraft way than having a bat crashing through the window. I'll give them credit for creativity there. Um, but again, I think some of the things they're missing here is the emphasis on storytelling of making you feel sorry for this guy. He's supposed to be a sympathetic figure. At least that's what I'm taking this as. If he's supposed to be a sympathetic figure, there's no Sarah Collins in this movie. That's another problem I have. There's an importance of Sarah in the story, and that's something I'm going to get into with my buddy Mark Gilman when we do our podcast Sunday. There's an importance of Sarah's death. There's a moment again when Sarah dies in the original series. Barnabas is a vampire. She's laying there in bed, sick, dying. Barnabas can do nothing to help her. And she dies in his arms and he hugs her. And you can feel his pain and sorrow for his little sister died. Where is that in this movie? It's not here because one, there's no Sarah Collins, and two, they don't do that. And the parents are already dead before he's a vampire. So Barnabas is chained up by the townsfolk, and for whatever reason they bury this secret. It's not just Angel. Here's another issue too I have with this movie. It's not just the town. It's not just Angelique burying him. It's the town itself, and they just forget about it. That's what made no sense to me, and they don't explain it that if they were to explain it that Angelique put a spell on him that make him forget, okay, I can understand that. But they don't explain that. I think you're just supposed to assume that. And maybe she did, maybe she didn't. We'll never know. So Barnabas lays in a coffin for a long time. He's chained up underground. He's not in a mausoleum in this. And you know, they're you see this construction crew, and they're digging something up, and what do they find? A coffin. He comes out of the coffin. He starts killing the construction crew left and right. It's one of the most terrifying and gruesome moments in the movie. There's going to be other terrifying moments too, not in a good way. But when he throws one of the construction workers, it throws it into like a I want to say a breaker box or something, and the light flashes on, and you see the big McDonald's M sign, and he says Mistopheles. Right here, that McDonald's sign you see in that movie, when you go back and watch this, that's where they're taken from Laura Parker's book, uh, Dark Shadows of Salem Branch. In a way, in Dark Shadows of Salem Branch, and I touched upon this in my Dark Shadows of Salem Branch review, so I'll repeat it here for those who haven't watched it. David is eating McDonald's French fries out of the carton, obviously. So instead of a box of French fries, they just use the McDonald's sign in this movie. I know that sounds so slim, but they really are sort of taken from Laura's book in this movie. Not much. When I say they're taking moments from Laura's book and sort of altering them, which really is annoying. Um, so Johnny Depp finds Jackie Earl Haley, played by Willow Loomis. I'm sort of jumping ahead. By this time, you've met a young girl named Victoria Winters, who's really Maggie Evans, who can see ghosts. Here, here is my biggest issue with this movie. Right the hell here. You have yet another interest. You have a interesting character who can talk to ghosts. Now, here's what I'll say. When people say they didn't quote the source material, yes and no. Because, hey, guess what? In Dark Shadows, there were characters that saw and talked to ghosts, like David Collins. But here, they're using Maggie Evans slash Victoria Winters. She's not really Victoria Winters. She's really Maggie Evans. And she's run away from her parents because they had placed her in an institution, in an asylum, I should say. So they place her in an asylum. She escapes. She runs away. She goes as far away as she can. And does Maggie Evans' parents live on the East Coast? No. If they did, I would say they would probably live in Carolina, if anything, but or Florida, somewhere south of Maine, obviously, because I do believe this woman is going north, not west to east, in my opinion. So you have this you have this girl on this train. Her name's Maggie. She wants to introduce herself as Maggie Evans, but she looks up and she sees a sign that says Winters, and she changes her name on the fly to Victoria Winters. How did she come here? A ghost, Josette's ghost, in a diner pointed to a magazine, pointed to a newspaper ad, and was like, "Go." She's pointing. She's saying, "Go here," without saying it. That is one thing I like about this movie. I like the fact that you have a character talking to ghosts, but you don't take enough advantage of it. To me, this girl sh- should have been part of the biggest centerpiece of your story, where as she's talking to ghosts, they're telling her about a witch. They're telling her about this first, not Barnabas. That's when Barnabas doesn't tell her he's a vampire. She should say, "I know what you are," and he thinks about killing her, and then she's like, I saw her ghost. He's like, "What?" "I saw Josette's ghost." That's something you should have had in this movie. A moment where the female protagonist is actually here not just to help the Collins family, but help Barnabas defeat Angelique. That's something they could have had in this movie, and they just don't. Again, it's another wasted opportunity for a character. I think Barnabas they've sort of already wasted by not telling you a heartfelt story about how he became a vampire and how he watched his family be killed in front of him, and there was nothing he could do about it. That they've already wasted in this movie. And it is a problem in this movie. I mean, look, this movie has a lot of problems. I'll get to the good stuff here in a moment. For all the bad dialogue though, you do have great interaction. I give these actors a lot of credit because they are trying to sell their characters. For as little as there is in this movie, the actors do try to sell, and I'll give a lot of credit to two actresses, especially Michelle Pfeiffer and Eva Green. They sold their ever loving asses off. Michelle Pfeiffer's Elizabeth Collins Stoddard is a joy to watch in this movie, and so is Eva Green's Angelique. I mean, they really make this movie watchable and entertaining for the most part. The sad part about that is it sort of makes you want to root for Angelique. When you make the character of Angelique likable, it sort of does take away from the plot point of this movie and the overall of feeling sorry for Barnabas. But Eva Green sells her ass off. I'm not going to give her heat. I give the writers. Oh, writer Seth Graham Smith. Now, once Maggie Evans slash Victoria Winters comes to Collinwood, obviously she has the job of governess, and she meets David, who cuts holes in the sheets. Roger Collins in this movie. It's a shame what they did to that character, is what I'll say. There's, to me, he's the most pointless character in this entire movie. He really is, and he's not. And really, he's not the only one. He's not the only one that makes pointless. And what do I think is his biggest issue? I think they're trying to make him too many characters at once. And I don't think that's the actor's fault. Again, that's just the way the script was written. It feels like they're trying to take part of Roger, part of Quentin, and put those two characters together. By Quentin, I mean Quentin's, charm and sarcasm. Roger had his own sarcasm. He didn't need Quentin's. When you get into the original series, Roger could be sarcastic in his own way. Lewis Edmonds proved that fact in the original series if you ever go watch it. Here, though, it feels like they're trying to combine that he's a womanizer, he's having sex with women. That's what I mean by the Quentin part too. And it's like, it just didn't fit to me. It's like, it didn't make any sense to have this scene, to have Barnabas spying on him either. It was really creepy. It's like, what is this? What is the point of this scene? There is no point. And speaking of pointless, Dr. Julia Hoffman, played by Helen Bonham Carter. I get the sense you were going to have Julia Hoffman in this story and have her be a psychiatrist. Again, these characters are not really like the series characters. Here's Helen Bonham Carter's Dr. Julia Hoffman. She is taking Barnabas's blood, but she's putting it in herself. Now, where they got that from is from Laura's book, Laura Parker's Dark Shadows of Salem Branch. Dr. Hoffman in the book says she's been using some of her DNA to cure Barnabas, but instead of saying that in this, she's more distracted by going down on him, and then when he finally confronts her, he realizes, you're not curing me, you're causing yourself to be a vampire. This is where I wish Barnabas would have just completely killed her instead of biting her. Barnabas should have knew. Like, come on. You got to know better here. And I feel it's just a weak way to get rid of the character, really. Again, some of these characters aren't greatly written. But the ones who are really give a performance. Is Johnny Depp's character poorly written? Johnny Depp's character, Barnabas, more felt like he was trying to find his Barnabas throughout this movie. I will say the biggest differences between if you're really going to look at his and Jonathan's, is not just the look, it's not just the pale skin. It's Johnny Depp's Barnabas isn't hiding that he's a vampire, really. not from the family at least. He he pretty much confirms he's a vampire when he's holding the silverware, and he says, "I see you've sold the silver too." And he's like, "How can you tell?" Roger's like, "How can you tell?" Because if this were pure silver, my hand would burst into flames. It's like he's pretty much spelling out that he's a vampire, which I find amazing. So he's not necessarily lying to the family about this. He's not necessarily blurting it out either, but he's not making enough effort to hide it really. I mean, they're putting the guy in the house in closets. No one sees this, by the way. By the way, when they're doing this, they put him up in a closet, they put him here. It's like, eh. Michelle Pfeiffer and Evergreen's chemistry together is really good to watch. I'll say that. Again, I like the sets; they're really well done. I like how the town looked. It looked like the '70s. There's my other issue with this movie too. Here's a movie that's filmed in 2012, and they set it at from a storytelling standpoint at the tail end of the series. Look, I've talked about how all three of these movies aren't canon with the series. I guess that would be my biggest question with this movie overall. Most overall of this movie, especially this movie, is what I'm trying to say. Why were you setting it from a storytelling standpoint at the tail end of the series? Your movie is made in 2012. At least, I'm not saying you have to set it exactly in the same year as your movie, but why not set it post 2000s? Just saying. Just saying. And think about it. This is the last Dark Shadows thing we get prior to this from a television standpoint is the 1991 revival. And that's saying something. This isn't television, this is in theaters. But this is the next Dark Shadows thing you see, for better or worse. Most of all worse. I'll say this. I don't think the cinematography is bad. The cinematography is actually good in this movie. Again, the sets are good. Who's my favorite character in this movie? Jack Earl Haley's Willie Loomis. He has the line of lines in this goddamn movie. When they kill Dr. Julie Hoffman and they're dumping her body in the water, Barnabas is threatening Willie's life. And he's like, I didn't like that bitch anyway, Barnabas. It's the best line in the whole movie. God, it really is. So, by the end of this movie, you have David's father leaves because Barnabas says, I'll give you a choice. You can take some money and leave or try to be the man you should be to your son. It, I wish they would have at least given the character some redemption here and did the right thing. And they don't. They have him leave anyway. Um, Again, he was useless. I mean, he was a pointless character to have in this story, other than David being in this story. But really, I don't think you needed Roger in this story to have David. You could have just had Roger. For all I cared, you could have killed Roger and his mother, Roger and his wife off in this movie, and I wouldn't have give a shit. That's saying something. Um, I will say that once he leaves, David's upset. There's no Dr. Julie Hoffman. She's been 86 at this point. And finally, there's a ball, and the ball drops, and he moves the little boy out the way, and this is what causes him to catch fire. And Victoria's like, "You're not human." It takes her this long to figure out he's a vampire. That's another problem I have too. Um, Eventually Barnabas is going to get chained up in a coffin. They're going to put him in a mausoleum with Angelique's panties over his face. Oh, why? Why, God? Why? Oh, God. Okay. So David comes and gets him out of there. And it's just so crazy that you have David who saves Barnabas after all this. Here's another crazy thing. Maggie Evans slash Victoria Winters disappears the last 10 minutes of this goddamn movie. And the best explanation they can give is Angelique has her under some spell. Like, look, I get, I'm sure Johnny Depp and Tim Burton had some input in here, but I'm sorry, if you're Seth Grahame-Smith and you had a pair of balls to begin with, you should have been saying no to this shit. And you really should. It just goes to show you what writers will write just to get their fucking foot in the door. And yes, I'm that pissed. I'm that pissed at this. And that's what I mean. It's like, look, I've I've pointed out some of the good moments in this movie. I really have. I love the explosion in this movie. Really well done, by the way. But there just aren't enough great moments to make this a good movie. And that's saying something. And I think the biggest thing this movie shows too is don't try to stuff a television series that's over 1,000 goddamn episodes in 2 hours. And why would you? I mean, why would you even attempt that? And that's to me what it felt like they were attempting with this. It's like, to me, somebody didn't want to do the right thing with Dark Shadows. And I gotta point the finger at Warner Brothers. I'm sorry. I do. Somebody at Warner Brothers did not give enough shit about Dark Shadows. They didn't. You can't tell me they did when they made this movie. I'm sorry. You're just never gonna convince me of that. If they did, okay, that's your opinion. My opinion is they didn't. Simply because they put this product out there. And look, I will say this to the 2012 fans of this movie. I'm glad you guys, there are people who like this movie. There are good moments in this movie. I get why some people like it. It's funny, it's entertaining. For the most part, it is. It is an entertaining movie to watch. It's not boring. That's something this movie isn't. But from a storytelling standpoint of this movie, it's not the greatest thing. I love the confrontation between Barnabas and Angelique in front of the townspeople. That's really well done. But I just feel it's something that should have been done sooner by Barnabas. If like, if you know this woman cursed you. Why are you giving her any ounce of chance? Why not just get rid of her? Is the town really going to miss Angelique that much? No, not really. I do think if they were ever to do a Dark Shadows movie ever again, here's one lesson they need to learn. One movie at a time, number one. Number two, start in the past. Start in 1795 and actually tell that story of Barnabas Collins the right way. That's another thing, too. Again, this movie had a lot of issues. Now, what are things I liked about it? Because I feel maybe I've knocked it too much. I've talked about how I liked Michelle Pfeiffer and Eva Green's performance together. I'll say this. Bella Heathcote did do a good job. Despite them sort of messing up her character, I don't feel she did a horrible job. I feel you do feel sorry for her. She's the one character outside of David I did feel sorry for. That here's this girl who got wrongfully committed to an asylum, of all things. And it's like, really, they just didn't understand why she was, that she could talk to ghosts. Sorry, I'm stammering. But I felt that as she's talking to Ghost more and more as she goes near Collinwood, it's something she should have continued. They should have had her continue to do. That the ghosts are trying to tell her, hey, something's going on here. And we need your help. And we need your help to get rid of this witch. Witch? That's something they could have done, and they just don't. But I do like Bella Heathcote's performance. She doesn't get enough credit for it in this movie. She is super sympathetic in this movie. And she's super likable. As Maggie Evans slash Victoria Winters. I did like the character of David. He's dark, he's gothic, but he's also very very adorable, and he's a kid who really want he's a kid in search of a father figure, and literally in this movie, and that is something they do get across in this movie, in my opinion. Despite their lack of storytelling in this, it's not hard to it's it's easy to get that message that David is in need of a father figure, especially when you meet the piece of shit that Roger is in this movie. Um, what am I? Oh, Barnabas kills a bunch of hippies. Actually, this is another part taken from Laura Parker's book, except for in Laura Parker's book, Barnabas does not actually kill a bunch of hippies. But in this movie, he does. My God. Oh my God. Oh God. Why? I've said this before, and I said this in my Dark Shadows Salem branch review. It'd have been me. I'd have been like tearing the script up, and I'd have handed Laura Parker a blank sheet of paper and like, please rewrite this mess. Please rewrite this movie. That's what I'd been doing if I'd have been anybody. But hey, what would I give this movie out of 10? Two, two, 2 out of 10. Um, and that includes the soundtrack. The soundtrack is amazing. I'll leave a link to Danny Elfman's main theme in this movie. Really good job. Look, it's Danny goddamn Elfman. Of course he did a good job. It's Danny Elfman, man. He did a great job scoring this movie. Danny Elfman does not get it. Again, I want to give credit where credit's due in this movie. There are people who do deserve credit for their performances. I think that's where some might be misguided, where it's like, oh, there's nothing good about this movie. No, there is. There are good things, but there's not enough great things to make it a good film. And that's the most important thing about this movie overall. I've spent 32 minutes talking about this thing. All right, guys, link to Danny Elfman's score will be in the description box. Hope you have a wonderful day.